In April 2023, authorities in Kenya uncovered one of the most disturbing religious tragedies in modern history. What began as a missing persons investigation in a quiet forest quickly turned into a mass grave discovery. And at the center of it all was a self-proclaimed pastor named Paul McKenzie. This is the story of how extreme faith, manipulation, and blind obedience led to the deaths of hundreds, and how a man claiming to serve God became the architect of unimaginable suffering. Who was Paul McKenzie? Paul McKenzie was a Kenyan preacher and founder of a small religious group known as the Good News International Church. To outsiders, the church appeared fringe but largely unnoticed. To his followers, McKenzie was seen as a spiritual authority, a man who claimed to have direct insight into God's will. McKenzie preached a strict and extreme version of Christianity. He warned his followers that the world was sinful, modern education was corrupt, and government systems were evil. Over time, his teachings grew darker and more dangerous. He began telling followers that the only way to reach heaven was through fasting to the point of death. The promise of salvation. Through starvation, McKenzie claimed that starvation would purify the body and prepare believers to meet Jesus. He instructed followers, including children, to stop eating and drinking. Some were reportedly told to refuse medical care, even when they were clearly dying. Followers were divided into groups based on how close they were to meeting God. Those closer to death were reportedly praised. Those who questioned the teachings were shamed, isolated, or punished. What made the situation even more chilling was that many followers voluntarily complied, believing they were securing eternal life. The Shakahola Forest McKenzie relocated many of his followers to a remote area known as Shakahola Forest, located in southeastern Kenya. There they lived in isolation, away from outside influence, family members, and authorities. Inside the forest, starvation became systematic. Witnesses later described how adults were told to starve first, followed by children. Parents reportedly watched their children weaken and die, believing it was God's command. Those who tried to escape or seek food were allegedly beaten or restrained. The discovery authorities were alerted when relatives reported missing family members who had joined McKenzie's church. What police found shocked the nation: mass graves, bodies buried shallowly in the forest soil. Many victims were emaciated, showing clear signs of prolonged starvation. Some graves contained entire families. Children made up a large portion of the victims. As searches continued, the death toll kept rising, eventually surpassing 400 victims, making it one of the deadliest cult-related tragedies in history. Autopsies and evidence, post-mortem examinations, revealed that most victims died from starvation, while others showed signs of strangulation, suffocation, or blunt force trauma. This raised a terrifying possibility: not everyone died willingly. Investigators believe that some followers who resisted starvation were killed to maintain control and obedience within the group. Paul McKenzie's arrest. Paul McKenzie was arrested and taken into custody shortly after the discovery. During questioning, he denied responsibility, claiming his followers acted on their own faith and free will. However, survivors painted a very different picture. They described McKenzie as authoritative, manipulative, and absolute in his control. He allegedly ordered fasting schedules, punished dissent, and discouraged contact with the outside world. Prosecutors accused him of mass murder, terrorism, child abuse, radicalization, crimes against humanity. Why did people follow him? This is the question many still ask. Experts point to a combination of poverty, religious vulnerability, charismatic leadership, fear-based teachings, isolation. McKenzie exploited people who were already searching for meaning, stability, and hope. By presenting himself as the only path to salvation, he created dependency and eventually deadly obedience. Children, the most tragic victims. One of the most devastating aspects of this case was the number of children involved. Many children were not old enough to consent, yet were forced into starvation alongside adults. Some were reportedly denied food even when crying or begging. Authorities later stated that children were often the last to die, after watching their parents starve first, a psychological cruelty almost impossible to comprehend. National and global reaction. The discovery shocked Kenya and drew international attention. The Kenyan government launched investigations into religious regulation failures, child protection gaps, how the group operated undetected for years. There were calls for stricter oversight of religious organizations and cult-like groups, while others warned against infringing on freedom of worship. The bigger picture. The Paul McKenzie case is not just about one man. It raises deeper questions. How far can religious freedom go before it becomes abuse? Why do people surrender critical thinking to spiritual leaders? How can societies better protect vulnerable individuals from manipulation? This tragedy shows how belief, when weaponized, can become as deadly as any physical weapon. Where the case stands today, Paul McKenzie remains in custody as legal proceedings continue. Authorities are still identifying victims, notifying families, and recovering remains from the forest. For many families, closure may never fully come, but the hope is that exposure, accountability, and awareness can prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again. Closing reflection. Paul McKenzie preached salvation. What he delivered was death. Hundreds lost their lives not through war, disease, or disaster, but through deception, fear, and blind faith. And as investigators continue their work in the Shakahola Forest, the world is left with a haunting reminder: when belief replaces humanity, tragedy follows.